Jon Sanderson, thank you for joining me on this interview. I appreciate it. A lot of guys know who you are. You got a lot of praise from John Beeline in the past couple of years, and then Jawan Howard kept you. You're the head strength and conditioning coach at the University of Michigan for their basketball, men's and women's basketball, and golf. And a lot of people have heard about you, seen the transformations that you've made on the basketball team with their bodies, added strength and speed. A lot of people don't know that you played Division I basketball at a school I really don't want to say. I just
Don't say it. Don't say it. They'll get mad at you.
Go down south, and now you're with the good guys. So I appreciate you joining us, and you're going to help all these golfers get strong and hit the ball a little further, have some more flexibility, and stay injury free. And I appreciate you joining me today.
Absolutely. Thanks, Jimmy. There's nothing better right now than to kind of get back and help others. So I think this should be a fun 20 minutes or whatever it is to kind of get back and share with others, and hopefully we can help your golf games and, with mobility and stability, all the things in my area that can kind of play along with golf instruction, which is more, Jimmy's expertise. So happy to be here and help out.
For sure. And it's a huge aspect of golf instruction, because it's one of the things when I'm watching somebody and when they're swinging, I need to know if there's physical limitations with their hips or shoulders. And if I ask them to do something, just like if you ask a player to do a move and he's got issues, he's not going to do it. So knowing if somebody has physical issues is huge. And a lot of times people just assume you can do something we're asking them to do, and we can't. We were chatting a little bit before we started, and we were talking about your work with some of these guys getting ready for the NBA draft, the basketball players, and we were talking about how over the years, golfers used to not even train. Now they do train, and they actually train explosive movements. They train probably similar moves, the basketball players. Can you talk a little bit about what the golf team does at Michigan and how that relates to what the basketball guys do and how you work with both?
Yeah, absolutely. You said it. Golfers are athletes too. And I think that over the years, it's becoming more and more relevant that training and being explosive, moving well, and being really coordinated is important for the sport, even though we're not sprinting and decelerating and jumping. We don't have to play above the rim in the sport of golf. But it all is a factor. It all factors into developing an elite athlete. So, I'd like to actually I want to share my screen real quick, because there's something that you mentioned about golf evaluations and assessments and how they move. You want to know, and you do this, you want to know how they move before you can start with a prescription of what to do and recommendations. So let me share my screen real quick.
Sure, that's great.
So let's see, make sure everyone can see this. Can you see that okay?
Yeah, for sure. We got it.
Okay. So the first thing we do, let me move my thing. Okay. The first thing we do is we want to evaluate the joint by joint approach, in specifically the ankles, the hips, and the thoracic spine. Those are the tightest areas of the body that are always problematic. I would say the ankle is probably a little bit more problematic with the basketball athlete because the ground reaction forces and cutting. But the first thing we want to do is evaluate how they move in the ankle, the hip, and T-spine. The anterior shoulder is also a big part, and then a posture analysis. So this has been around for a while, but it's just the joint by joint approach. It's an excerpt from my book. I believe Greg Cook is the one that originally put this out. But the whole point is there's parts of your body that need to be stable. There's parts of your body that need to move really well. And then if you look, I have a picture in my book, and we'll talk about that a little bit more later, Power to Swing. But all our athletes, the bottom right over here, you'll see a mobility map. We evaluate them, and then we have a map on where they're at, So that's the first step that we do in training our athletes. For all of our golf athletes, all of our basketball athletes, we want to see how they move. And then we can kind of get into more specific training in terms of performance. Our basketball guys will have a whole NBA combine protocol. Our golfers, I'm interested in how far can we load and rotate and throw a med ball, a 10, 15-pound med ball. that's very specific, just like a lane agility test is for basketball athletes. Doing vertical jump testing is incredibly valuable for both sports. We do that, and just having some baseline strength numbers in the weight room is important for our golf athletes. So that's our first step, Jimmy. I mean, we want to know that before we do anything else, and that's a big part. And there's actually one. I'm sorry to be long-winded.
Yeah.
There's
Good.
one more thing I wanted to share along with that to kind of further my point. Let's see. Can you see that okay?
Yep.
Creating the training prescription.
Yeah.
So we get that information, and then we write a training template or a training prescription based on mobility, stability, deficiencies.
Okay.
Does this athlete need to gain weight? Surprisingly, there's not a whole lot, but we'll get golf athletes that could use 10, 15 pounds of lean muscle mass and hit the ball further. We have athletes that need to lose weight. And then, we have force plate technology. If an athlete just kind of lags and doesn't have pop in their hips, explosive training is a huge part as well. So that's kind of our first step. Medical does their physicals, the medical physicals, and then we get them and we do this, and then we're off to the races with training. And that's where it gets fun, is you can be really individualized.
Sure. I mean, to me, it seems like when you looked at the golfers now that are having success, like your Brooks Koepka, Dustin Johnson, Roy McIlroy, and these guys are lifting heavy weights for some of their workouts. They're lifting fast, explosive movements. Like you said, they're doing box jumps, they're doing these kind of things, which back in the 1990s and 80s, golfers never did. So if you got a guy coming in, and I'm curious too, because I know the stuff we did when I was there is completely different now as you're the coach. Are there typical moves that you're doing a lot with the golf team? Like, do you guys squat a lot? Do you guys do bench? Do you deadlift? I know the posterior chain and the lower back is huge in golf, and the hips. Can you speak on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So along the lines of that initial movement screen, so excuse me, the athletes that are extremely tight and they can't get into certain positions, I'm not going to put a bar on their back and have them squat. So that's kind of all part of that first week or two evaluation assessment. But we'll have other athletes that move beautifully. Their hips move well, their thoracic spine, their ankles, and they can get into squat positions with good posture. They can, certainly deadlifting is a little bit easier position to do. Yeah. And we absolutely will do those bigger movements with those athletes. We've had golf athletes that squat twice their body weight. Now, they don't do it the first week they're at Michigan. We call it progressive overload, and we got to get to here before we get to here, and so on. But yeah, I mean, we'll have athletes all over the board. I mean, we'll have athletes that squat really well, and we'll progress them, and they'll get to a point where they can move heavier loads. We'll have athletes that just can't do it, and we got to really double down on mobility and yoga-like stretching, soft tissue work, foam rolling, and the goal is to find single leg movements. I mentioned earlier in our pre-talk, like a rear foot elevated split squat position. That's an incredible movement that doesn't require you to load your back. You can hold dumbbells, you can hold on the side, you can do a goblet position, kettlebells, hold a plate, and it's a great movement to get a lot of range of motion in your hips and get strong. So we'll have athletes all over the board. The majority of our women's golfers just move a little bit better. I think that just the gender difference between men and women, it's been a theme for 15 years working in golf. It's not 100% accurate, but most of our women's golf athletes will move a little bit better and be able to do some of those progressions earlier than some of our men. It all comes down to their training background. Did they stretch in high school?
Yeah.
Things like that. So.
And I feel like so many kids, I mean, they don't. I mean, at least when I was growing up, and I'm sure it's the same, when you're in high school and middle school and beyond that, you're playing your sport. And if you do work out, that's rare, but they're not spending time stretching because they're kids. They're just like, let's go do it, let's play. Yep. And I can tell you as you get older, I mean, stretching's important, big time.
Huge, huge. Yep.
And we're going to get some guys that are younger listening to this, but the majority, like I kind of told you, are those 35 to even 75. It's a huge range. But a lot of these guys that are members at a country club are business professionals. They have gym memberships that, speaking from when I see them, they use those gym memberships mainly October through March. And then the rest of the time in the summer, when they're not working their 9 to 5, they're at the club. Are there things that they can do either at their gym or at their home that would help them with problem areas you see with golf? When I teach people, what I typically hear, low back, and for sure the hips. I have sometimes getting the guys to turn back properly and load onto the rear hip, and getting open, rotating through the ball. So hips and low back, that area to me is big.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, think about our sport. I mean, you're in a bent over position and you're rotating repeatedly in the same direction over and over and over again. So if you're serious about golf and you're practicing, I mean, think about the thousands of reps that you accumulate doing the same thing. So it's a sport that just lends itself to low back dysfunction, you know? So here's a few things. Oh, did I lose you?
No.
Okay, good. My screen vanished for a second. Here's a few things. I'm gonna share my screen again.
Yeah.
So these are kind of the, let's see, let me find it. Okay, can you see that okay?
Yeah.
So one of the most common areas of deficiency is an anterior pelvic tilt. So this is an athlete that you'll see the anterior part of their hip, the front part of the hip is a little bit lower than their posterior side.
Sure.
You know, that type of pelvic positioning is just going to lend itself to low back dysfunction. Look how short that is. Look how shortened the erectors and that low back is compared to how long our abdominals are. So this is a really common thing that we see over and over again with, I don't care if you're, you know, you mentioned the 35 to 75-year-old population or the 18-year-old freshman. This is common because we spend so much time seated, and in that position, you're going to put a crank on your low back. So, you know, opening up the anterior hip flexor stretching is huge. Quad and hip flexors are huge. Training the abdominals, to answer your question, like, you know, the person that is not in the gym as much and they're golfing a lot during the spring, summer, and early fall months, stretching your hip flexors to balance that out. Doing planks, doing front planks, doing some dead bug progressions to help bring the abdominals, you know, bringing the ribs down. That's huge. Doing some simple things for the hamstrings, some like glute bridge type of holds for the glutes and hamstrings will all help correct that. And then the other thing I wanted to share is, you know, our thoracic spine over here is supposed to rotate 30 degrees compared to the lumbar, you know, 0 to 18. The whole point is the lumbar is a stable part of our body that needs to not move as much as our thoracic spine and our hips. So our hips got to be mobile. They got to move well in all planes. And, you know, you can find all kinds of hip mobility things you could do for that golfer in the spring, summer, and fall, in a pre-round of golf, post-golf. But those are some little things that just add up. And so you go back to it, and the golfer that's tight in the thoracic, tight in the hips, the lumbar is forced into greater range of motions than it wants to go to, you got problems. So, so those are a quick, you know, some things that I would do that even if you're not going to the gym, I mean, stretching your hips, stretching your thoracic spine, just doing some simple lying on your side, thoracic spine rotation movements. There's a million of them out there that you can do. So that's what I would recommend to counter out that low back dysfunction that's kind of inevitable in our sport if you play long enough. I mean, everyone has a little bit here and there. So
yeah, and from my perspective, there's guys that have swings that have a tendency to have more lower back issue. I've used Jason Day as an example before because he stays very, very firm with his knees, and he kind of resists on the turn instead of letting the turn go. But one thing that you can equate working out and what you're talking about to the golf swing is kind of like that weak point. And low back for sure. I mean, I've had low back issues. You show me a golfer that has not had a low back issue, and I'll tell you a guy that hasn't either played a lot or practiced a lot.
Exactly.
But I think the difference in understanding is, all right, yeah, it's a low back issue, but what caused it? And a lot of times it's the hips. It's not the low back, it's your hips are tight.
No doubt. So, and it's the same thing that goes for our basketball athletes as well. I mean, tight hips, guys with tight hips always have chronic issues and don't move well. So it it plays into movement. And if it's in your golf swing or if it's a defensive slide in basketball, tight hips equal poor movement quality. And the center of your body has to move well to perform well, honestly, in any ground-based sport. So golf is no exception to that rule. They have to. If anything, it's more extreme. It shows itself more in golf than other sports, I believe, because how detailed the swing is and the movement quality that has to happen. And frankly, the athletes, the golf athletes that we'll have coming in that are tight in their hips, and then 3, 4, 5, 6 months goes by and they've added range of motion and they feel free. They feel better. It's way more than even a lot of those athletes have had because of their age haven't experienced low back pain yet. But it would be coming if they didn't correct it. But they just feel free. They feel like, oh man, I can get into positions. I got more power. I can get behind this a little bit more. And our golf coaches love it. Guys like you that can do more with the athlete. It's huge. So
yeah. And I've seen it happen even where you talk about guys at the top of their game. In the late 90s, early 2000s, David Duval was #1 in the world in golf. Challenging Tiger Woods. He lost a bunch of weight, was literally a workout fiend. He's lifting weights. He's running 5 miles before a competitive round. And he hurt his back and he hurt his lower back. And next thing you know, he completely started making compensations in his swing, and we never heard from him again. He basically went away from the game.
Yep.
And it all started with an injury in the gym that he ignored that caused swing issues because he couldn't turn properly. So to me, if a typical guy at a country club or any golf course, they're not Division I athletes. Like I said, they're short on time. When they're going out to the range and they got 30, 40 minutes before they tee off, obviously they want to hit golf balls. They might want to hit a few putts. Should they stretch beforehand? Should they go, we have a gym here at the club. Should they maybe get loose and break a sweat for 10 minutes and then stretch and then go to the range? What would you kind of recommend? How would you stretch?
I would, you always want to get warm. You always want to find a way to get warm before you do any activity. So is it realistic to go take a walk or jog a little bit? Not always. Most golfers aren't going to want to do that. So to me, a great alternative is foam rolling. Foam rolling, especially you get into some of those the vibrating foam rollers. We have the Vipers. We have probably 25 of them in our facility. And the vibration has a heating mechanism to it not a literal heating mechanism, but over time, the vibration causes friction in the muscle and gets it warm. So foam rolling is a great way to start, and just kind of having a little routine. We've talked to our U of M clubhouse, Chantel that kind of runs that, about having a spot for golfers to kind of warm up. We've talked about having like a formal program that they could do, and but foam rolling's huge. I like half kneeling stretches, hip stretches. I like to, if it's a towel or if it's we have all kinds of like Airx pads, little blue pads. We take a knee. And obviously that could be done if you have a towel. You could do it out, somewhere outside, away from everyone before you start swinging. But getting a half kneeling position, doing all kinds of, hip flexor stretches. There's all kinds of. We have a 5-way hip mobility series that honestly gets every angle that you need. Now, would I expect our golfers to, have a seat and do all kinds of yoga-like stretches? Probably not. I don't see that. But a half kneeling position is a great start. And then you foam roll for a few minutes. You do a few hip stretches. There's certain things you could do upper body, some, just getting some motion, getting some thoracic stuff standing. And then you go through your routines of putting and hitting balls. And to me, that is a great recipe for just feeling good, preventing some issues, some potential low back stuff, and maximizing your day golf.
Yeah, I would agree. And what we typically see is anything but, and I'm guilty of it too. You've got a busy day, you get to go play, you just tee it up, and next thing you know, you haven't hit a range ball and you're ripping a driver at 110 miles an hour. So
Yeah.
I think we can all be smarter when it comes to that. Based on that, the other common thing I see, other than tightness and lower back issues, is the guy that's 60 years old. And a lot of them are like my dad's friends, and I get the common complaint is I'm losing distance.
Yep.
And they're losing speed, and they're complaining to me, how do I hit it further, or at least maintain what I have? Do you have suggestions of kind of what we're talking about, but if you were to talk to a 6-year-old about this is how you can increase your club head speed or at least maintain what you have for the next decade?
Yeah, absolutely. So, not every 50-year-old or 60-year-old is equal. I mean, there are some that are incredibly fit and train regularly, and there's some that are not. So, so there isn't a cookie cutter approach. I would say this: having core integrity, core stability, just goes a long way. We've talked a lot about mobility, the importance of hip mobility, thoracic spine already. Adding some plank progressions. I mean, plank progressions can be very, very elementary. You can do them on your knees before you progress to your toes. You can do wall. You can do side planks on the wall. You can elevated positioning just to make it a little bit easier to start for progressions. But core integrity or stability is a great way to start. The other thing is, I write programs for all of our coaches like to get my feedback, and I've had coaches in their 50s and 60s that want like having a physio ball behind their back and doing body weight squats. But just getting those bigger muscle groups and crossing the hips and the knees, moving with whatever way you feel comfortable. Can you do a lunge? Can you do a body weight lunge at that age? Some can, some can't. But there's a lot of body weight things you can do to give you that, that's the horsepower, right? I mean, strength development is your horsepower. So golf's a unique sport to where there are athletes that we can add range of motion and they can get into better golf position and hit the ball further, which isn't true usually with my basketball athletes. Adding mobility doesn't really make them jump higher. It keeps them healthy. I mean, there's a lot of things that they could do and kind of take a step backward and just start simple body weight, and that will have a tremendous impact over time with adding distance or maintaining distance in that 50, 60 plus age group. Absolutely, they can do that stuff.
And especially now, a lot of us are, for the foreseeable future, going to be working at home. They can still come and play golf, or like I said, our club is open, but if they're at home doing a business call, put that call on speakerphone and get on the ground and do some planks or stretches in between that. And
absolutely
kind of work their body that way while they're doing work. The one thing, you've said it and we've talked, is I interviewed Claude Harmon III, who's a top teacher just last week, and his student was Brooks Koepka. I mean, he is in a tour van, and the vans that go on the PGA Tour are basically gyms on wheels. Yep. And they're for an hour to an hour and a half before they even go to the range. And I think a lot of people would be shocked to hear he's only spending 30 minutes on the range and an hour and a half in the gym before he plays 18 holes. But it speaks to the volumes that this is our body. And like you said, it's our motor. We need to have it in proper working condition.
Absolutely. One more thing that we talked a lot about mobility. Now we've touched some of the stability stuff. Activation is another huge part that we haven't touched on yet. And let's be honest, like before a major round, some guys are more aggressive than others. We can get really, you can get into like the potentiation effect. We call post-activation potentiation of moving, some decent loads, and then your nervous system is primed and you're going to hit the ball further. That's a big thing. But most golfers are not going to be in that gym for an hour and a half and grind themselves like the hardest workout of their lives, and then they're dead. I mean, there's going to be some restraint with that. So what you'll see in a lot of those scenarios, and we do it with our athletes, is activation models where we get a band around our knees. We're doing some band slides, some monster walks. We're doing our core integrity. We're doing our anti-rotation movements with bands. We're doing a little bit of strength work, depending on when it is, but like activation is huge. So getting a band, wrapping it around a pole or something, and getting some chopping movements in, getting some holds. You have your sagittal, your frontal plane, and then your transverse plane, the rotary plane. And we live in that frontal and transverse plane as golfers, right? So engaging that area, engaging those muscles, besides the foam rolling and the mobility and the hip stuff, will lead. And I have some data, and I think I have some graphs in my book about how it makes an immediate impact on performance, like 5, 6, 7, 8 yards right away, just by being more primed and being the best version of yourself versus being kind of cold and lethargic, right? So that's huge. That's huge.
Yeah, I mean, if you're talking 10 yards or so, that's one club difference. So now if I'm hitting my 9-iron because I was ready to go, and my buddy, who usually is the same distance, is hitting his 8 or 7-iron, even my miss will be closer. So it's big. Yeah. It's really big. Jon, I know you've mentioned it, and obviously you have a book dedicated to golf. Can you tell everybody where to find this book, where to find more information on it?
Yeah, absolutely. The easiest way is just to go to my website, campsanderson.com. I wrote my first book, Above the Rim. It's been 4 years now. 2016, I believe I published it. And then I just fell in love with writing. So I didn't take I don't think I took more than maybe a week or two off. And I started writing this book, Power of the Swing. It's a 200 plus page book that kind of dives into all the things we just discussed: mobility, stability, increasing distance, low back health. Trent Salo, Trent's on the back as well. He's my co-author. He's the director of performance with the Detroit Pistons. Nice. So we kind of got together. I think we spent 2.5 years, chipping away. A book this size, you don't just do it overnight. So. But campsanderson.com is a great way to start. I think it's on sale right now for $19.99. But it was fun. I really enjoyed it. And again, for a former college basketball player who's been in this golf world now for going into year 15, it was fun for me to learn even more about golf. And I learned so much during the process of researching and validating all my methods by writing the book. So. Hopefully, some of you guys will enjoy it. Pick it up.
Yeah, no, I'll put a link in this section too, so guys that watch this video can look into it. And
yeah,
I tell you, you are an inspiration for a lot of us. I mean, I follow what you do with the basketball program, the golfers. I've talked to past coaches about how you've transformed so many of those guys, and you can play so much longer if you're healthy. I mean, it's sad to see guys get in their 70s and they can't play anymore, or they complain, or they're in pain, and then you see a guy that's taking care of their bodies and they're playing into their 80s. And that's what this game's all about. It's a game we can play our whole life if we treat our body correct, right?
Yep, absolutely. So I mentioned earlier, I have 2 boys and a girl, and my oldest is 12, and he's already 5'7", and he's nice. Like every day he's pretty good, and he wants to play me 1-on-1. And I'm like, man, I'm getting old to play basketball, and it hurts a little bit to play. But golf, me and him can, to your point, I'm young in the golf world. I got plenty of years, plenty of decades to enjoy the game. And very few sports are like that. So no, I'm with you. Absolutely. It's a great sport, and I love being part of it.
Awesome. Jon, I'm so thankful for your time today. I know that you're on a lot of Zoom meetings, you're on the phone a lot, working from home with a lot of athletes professionally and in college. And I wish you a good summer, and I thank you so much for your time.
Absolutely, Jim. Thank you so much for having me on. Really enjoyed it. Appreciate it.
Cool. Thank you.